Welcome to today's video where we're diving deep into one of the most epic films in cinematic history, Lawrence of Arabia, 1962. Directed by David Lean, this masterpiece tells the story of T. Lawrence, a British officer who played a pivotal role in the Arab Revolt against the Ottoman Empire during World War I. But behind the scenes of this monumental film, there are some pretty weird and fascinating facts you might not know about. Let's get started. The film's length almost ruined it. When Lawrence of Arabia was first screened for its executives, it was a whopping 4 hours long. The film's original cut was considered too long for mainstream audiences, and many believed it would be a financial disaster. David Lean and his team had to make drastic cuts to the film, trimming it down to just over 3 hours, and it still became a massive success. Imagine if we had seen the original 4-hour version. Peter O'Toole wasn't the first choice. Though Peter O'Toole's portrayal of T. Lawrence is now iconic, he wasn't the first actor considered for the role. Marlon Brando, Burt Lancaster, and even Albert Finney were all in the running before O'Toole. O'Toole, a relatively unknown actor at the time, was cast because of his intensity and the deep complexity he could bring to the character. His performance, though, became a defining moment in cinematic history. The camel riding was real and painful. If you've ever watched Lawrence of Arabia and thought those camel scenes looked authentic, that's because they were. In fact, the actors did their own camel riding, and the process was far from easy. Peter O'Toole admitted that riding camels in the desert heat for long hours was excruciating. The crew had to endure not only the physical discomfort, but also the extreme temperatures of the Moroccan and Jordanian deserts where they filmed. The costumes were full of surprises. The costumes in Lawrence of Arabia were designed by the legendary British costume designer Phyllis Dalton. However, there's an interesting fact about the authenticity of these outfits. While they looked very accurate to the time and setting, some of the costumes were modern adaptations. For example, the boots worn by Peter O'Toole were actually a modified version of a style worn by soldiers during World War I, though they weren't originally designed for the film's period. The desert locations were a nightmare for filming. Filming in the desert presented several unexpected challenges for the crew. Aside from the obvious heat and dust, the location in Jordan was plagued by frequent sandstorms that would delay shoots for hours. The filmmakers also had to deal with the difficulty of transporting heavy film equipment to these remote areas. But despite the odds, the vast desert landscapes helped to create one of the most visually stunning films ever made. The iconic scene with the match. One of the most memorable scenes in the film is when T. Lawrence, played by O'Toole, lights a match, blows it out, and then does it again. The scene is subtle yet intense, symbolizing Lawrence's inner conflict and determination. But here's the weird part. It wasn't actually in the script. David Lean had Peter O'Toole perform the action on the spot as a way to show Lawrence's enigmatic character. The scene became so iconic that it's often used in promotional materials and is considered one of the film's most famous moments. The soundtrack was almost a different genre. The film's legendary score, composed by Maurice Jarre, is one of the standout features of Lawrence of Arabia. However, it was almost a very different soundtrack. At one point, the studio wanted to go with a more traditional classical score, but David Lean and Jarre pushed for a sweeping, more cinematic sound that reflected the epic scale of the film. The result was the now iconic music that remains synonymous with the film. The film's budget was astronomical. At the time of its release, Lawrence of Arabia was one of the most expensive films ever made, with a budget of around $15 million, a huge sum in the 1960s. This astronomical budget was due to the immense scale of the production, which required extensive set designs, large crews, and a large number of extras. The cost almost led to its collapse at several points during production, but its eventual success at the box office made it worth every penny. The desert was a war zone. During the time of filming, the area where Lawrence of Arabia was being shot was not as stable as it is now. The region was embroiled in political unrest and conflict, and the filmmakers had to work around the situation. In fact, a number of the cast and crew were nervous about the local situation, but they went ahead with filming. The backdrop of real-life turmoil added an extra layer of authenticity to the film, even though it made the production process extremely tense at times. The film almost had a different ending. The original screenplay for Lawrence of Arabia had a completely different ending in mind. It originally depicted T. Lawrence's final moments in a more heroic and definitive manner. However, David Lean decided to change the ending to reflect Lawrence's tragic and ambiguous life. This new ending left audiences questioning the true nature of Lawrence's character and his impact on the Arab Revolt. In hindsight, the altered ending became one of the most talked about elements of the film. And there you have it, 10 weird facts about Lawrence of Arabia that you might not have known. From the difficulties of filming in the desert to the iconic performances and behind-the-scenes drama, this film's history is as epic as the story it tells. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Lawrence of Arabia, don't forget to like and subscribe for more fun facts about your favorite films. Thanks for watching.